phone died. His phone died.
Oh, well.
We had to stop the call. There's a number of other things that we can cover. Some of from Mark's lectures in the past. Also, I'll put him on the spot and say that if you have physics and science-based questions, you can call in and ask those too.
Oh.
And I'll be happy to know that Mark, out of all the scientists that I've met, is one of the ones who's most eager to just say, I don't know the answer to that. Let me go do some more research.
Yeah, I might have to do that right on the spot here too.
It's rare that we find a preacher who's willing to actually say that, or an apologist. And on that note, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to kind of talk about Dineshs Souza, who is I guess one of the more highbrow Christian apologists, although I think we're probably, I was going to use the unibrow line, but one of the minute little bits of praise that he's getting for his new book, which is called What's So Good About Christianity, is that, this is a departure. You've had all these atheist screeds from Dawkins, Harris, Dennett, Hitchens, and they're all full of polemics. And Dinesh answers all of them without, being, polemic at all. It's a wonderful intellectual romp through the justifications for Christianity with absolutely no disparaging remarks for the atheists at all. At least that's what they're saying. Now, I haven't actually read the book. I did read parts of the book, some of it today, some of it the other day, some excerpts in an article and a little bit at the bookstore today. He sets out a list of things that he's going to demonstrate in his book. And it was just, on almost every point, it was like, why does that matter? Or, oh my gosh, can you really be that wrong? I think the first point was that Christianity is responsible for all of the benefits of modern society, and while I haven't read what his particular argument is for that, I would imagine it has something to do with the fact that religious organizations are responsible in large part for universities and the progress of the university. I mean, it's no secret. The church had money. The church had, at the time, the need to educate people, and so they built universities to do that. That doesn't say anything at all about whether or not the religion underlying it is true. That religion has benefited mankind, or that religion has provided us with growth and opportunity in different areas, I don't know that that's under dispute at all. I don't have a problem with it. Nobody's saying that religion's all bad or that it's done nothing but harmful things. There's a lot of positive benefits, but it doesn't speak to whether or not the religion itself is true. Some of the other points that he wants to make are that atheism is kind of the opiate of the morally hopeless, that we can pretend all we want that there's a rational justification for the rejection of theism, but really we just want to be naughty and not have to suffer the penalty, so we just kind of rationalize God away. What other claims did he make in his opening? I've forgotten. I don't have the book handy, and I apologize. I'm planning on reading it soon, just because of all of the apologists, Dinesh is the one that tends to get a lot of credit. I mean, they're comparing him to the C.S. Lewis of a new age, and to me that would be an insult, because I don't particularly find C.S. Lewis that logical, or I don't find the arguments particularly compelling. I will say that both C.S. Lewis and Dineshs Souza produce, I'm reluctant to call them argument, but claims and bits of sophistry that sound appealing if you're preaching to the choir. If you're not willing to critically examine the various claims and look for factual evidence to support them, if you're already wanting to believe, then his arguments tend to sound pretty good, but they're not going to be convincing to anybody who's remotely adept at critical examination. He made a number of claims in this new book. One of them, atheism is responsible for mass murders. And this is kind of a response because Dawkins, Harris, and others have pointed out that religions have been responsible for a lot of killing over the years. I mean, the Crusades. Now, I don't tend to bring this up very often on the show because I think there are good points to be made. And Harris has made a point that, you know, the Crusades weren't a perversion of Christianity. It was an exercise of Christianity. These things are really justified. You know, you can interpret the Bible in different ways. You can interpret it in ways that don't support an inquisition, don't support torture, punishment, and murder. But you can also interpret it in ways that do. And that's part of the problem. I don't know what Dinesh's actual argument is with this, but this is something that comes up a lot. You'll talk about atheist Russia and the atrocities that were committed there, and then atheist China and all these things. The problem is that atheism isn't responsible for the atrocities. Nobody's doing these things in the name of atheism, because how could you? Atheism is simply a lack of a belief or an absence of belief in a God. It doesn't say anything about what you should do. It doesn't have any dogma or tenets. There's no instruction there on how you're supposed to live your life, which is why there are a number of philosophical worldviews that are consistent with atheism, but atheism itself is not a worldview. It's a single position on a single question. Do you believe that there's a God? If your answer is anything other than yes, you're an atheist. If it's yes, you're a theist. I mean, it really is that simple. His claim that atheism is responsible for mass murder is only valid if you accept these really odd redefinitions of atheism that he and some others try to go through. What he's really saying is that absent a belief in a God, you can justify any kind of atrocity to another human being. And my response would be, you can do the same thing with a belief in a God. And I don't have to go much further than the various struggles that we've seen in the Middle East to demonstrate that. These people definitely believe in God, and yet they're willing to fly planes into buildings and murder people over cartoons. And you know, the modern American fundamentalist Christian looks at fundamentalist Islam and sees it as a threat. And I think they're right to. I think there is some threat there. The threat isn't necessarily Islam. The threat's fundamentalism, and in any kind of dogmatically asserted position where we divided the world into us and them, and we're right and we've got God on our side. There's a real threat there. The thing that the American Christians don't seem to get in particular is that the only reason their religion isn't the same threat is because secular society that surrounded them and constructed the ethics and rules of our society has forced them, pulled them kicking and screaming into a more ethical 20th and 21st century. You know, we've mentioned it several times before. Christianity doesn't just not say slavery is bad, it endorses slavery, right down to how much you're supposed to charge, who you can enslave and who you can't. Jesus doesn't come out after the fact and say, whoops, we were wrong in the Old Testament. He actually supports slavery, and so does Paul and the rest of them. This is, if you're going to make the claim that you're more moral, that you have some divine author that has a high moral precept, then you can't do that when your book says, hey, slavery's okay. And the funny thing is that, you know, 150 years ago, you had preachers who were saying, no, you can't get rid of slavery. Slavery is good. It's ordained by God. It's right here in the Bible. You know, this is the Word of God. This is our instruction manual for how to treat each other, and this says we're allowed to have slaves. How dare you think that you're more moral than God? And yet, we are. We are more moral and more ethical because we have the morals and ethics of all of those who came before us. We've seen the mistakes of the past. We have a greater understanding of what works in the broad context, what actually benefits society on the whole. We're able to take a much longer view when making decisions so that it's not just me, and right now. We have grown, and ethics and morals have changed. And the ethics and morals of Christianity have changed right along with it. You know, nobody out there, not even Fred Phelps, is actually following to the letter every little moral code in that book. You couldn't. And they'll admit it, but what ends up happening is they tend to admit it by saying we're incapable of it because we're imperfect human beings, but we really should be trying to follow all of it. Dinesh goes into a number of other things. He talks about the difference between a secular moral system, a naturalistic worldview, and morals, and how many people have said that morals evolved, as I just did, and that this just doesn't work because it doesn't solve a fundamental problem of what do you tell the guy who stands out there and says, nope, everybody's got their own morals, I got my morals, I don't agree with you, I'm doing my own thing. And he pretends that Christianity, by virtue of claiming a divine author, solves this problem. He's wrong. He doesn't solve that problem at all, and I can prove it. Nope, I don't accept what you claim to be divine authorship of morality. I don't think your God's real. I don't think your book has anything in there that's more moral than what I'm come up with. I can do the same thing with regard to his claim of Christian authority that he's saying people could do with regard to a secular authority. What he doesn't realize is that he not only has not solved the problem, but in claiming that he has, and confusing the terms, he's actually demonstrated the problem and shown why it's not the problem that he thinks it is. Morals and ethics are kind of the product of society. They're derived by consensus in some cases, and the consent. The government is by the consent of the governed. The principles of the United States, for example, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, these are the rights and freedoms that we afford our citizens. And one of the things is that if you want to be a part of that society, if you want to, we recognize in general the people who are part of the society. I realize some folks are born here and never really think about it too much. The society, the base principles of the society are something that they're lofty goals. They're things that we believe in. We think that these things benefit the society as a whole and the individual. We prefer this society to, for example, as Jeff D was pointing out to me earlier today, a Nazi-type society. And I don't want to bring up Nazism, but I'm just comparing different sets of societal rules and freedoms. But in order to appreciate and make use of those rights and freedoms, there's a sacrifice. And I'm not just talking about the many men and women who have sacrificed their lives in order to ensure that freedom for all of us. I'm talking about the sacrifice that individuals make. In order for me to live in society and benefit from the rights and freedoms that our society has, I have to say, you know what? I'm willing to give up a freedom that I could claim, which is my right to do whatever I want, to hell with y'all. That's what you give up. You basically say, in order to benefit from this society, I'm willing to live within the rules of this society, and I understand that I'll be punished if I don't. Sent to prison if I break the rules, or pay a fine if I break the rules, or shunned. So to answer Dinesh's question about what do you say to the guy who stands there and obstinately says, no, I don't accept your moral authority, I'm my own moral authority, I'm doing my own thing. Fine, pack sand. You don't get to be a part of our society. If you don't want to play with the rest of the group, too bad. Now, I say that, and it tends to come off as kind of majority rules, but it's not a simple majority rule. So this is one of the things where I think our founding fathers did a great job, and one of the reasons why I'm proud to be American and proud of the way that society's evolved, and that is that simple majority rule does not apply. The Constitution establishes specific rights and freedoms, and its purpose is to protect those rights for all people, so that the majority can't come along and say, hey, you know what, let's take out this minority. Let's go ahead and enslave this minority. The freedoms are protected for everybody. And I don't, it frustrates me to no end that particularly...
Even down to individuals.
Yeah. It frustrates me to no end that even, religious people, many, and I'm speaking specifically about, Christians or majority Christians, don't seem to understand how important religious freedom is, specifically First Amendment rights. You've got, these groups that are perhaps dominionists that would like to see Christians ruling the United States. Let's turn this into a Christian nation. And then, of course, there's those other deluded people who feel that this is a Christian nation founded on Christian principles, which is just absurd. It's they don't seem to understand that the only way to guarantee and protect your own religious freedom is to make sure that you're offering that same religious freedom to the rest. And that's why, oddly enough, atheists, people who don't have a religious belief, often end up being some of the more vocal proponents of religious freedom, because one of the things that we're able to understand is that religious freedom includes the freedom not to have a religion. It's basically a freedom of mind, that you are the owner of your mind, that we can't impose our will upon you, we can't make you swear fealty to somebody, or punish you or torture you until you confess a particular religion, or recant some scientific discovery or statement, as they did with Galileo.
One of the presidential candidates, I was listening to him on C-SPAN, and he was making the point that, we've got all kinds of different religions and views on all kinds of different topics, but the one thing we as Americans can all come together on and pretty much agree on is we're all in favor of liberty. And I'll bet you can probably guess which candidate that might have been.
No.
No, it was Ron Paul.
Was it?
Yeah.
I wish I could have guessed.
Even though he professes to be religious, my belief is that he would consider liberty to trump that.
Well, see, and then, when we talk about comments, especially, in this politically charged election year, you've got, I think it was Mitt Romney who made that blunderously moronic statement of religion requires freedom and freedom requires religion. No, freedom doesn't require religion. You know what freedom requires? Freedom! It's that easy. We talked about this a little bit on the Nonprofit Show, about this statement that religion requires freedom and freedom requires religion. I hate to keep using the same words over and over again. Let's see, I've used absurd, crazy, insane, silly. It's just wrong. And I don't necessarily know that he believes it or believed it for real. To me, it sounds a lot like the political line where you throw out where it makes a good soundbite. Religion requires freedom, and freedom requires religion. It's nonsense.
Yeah, well, these are big-time politicians, and they are not necessarily saying what they would really like to say, but they're trying to gather votes.
Well, some of them, I think, said exactly what they'd like to say when they were asked what they thought about the Bible. A couple of them couched it in language that, well, I don't necessarily believe every word, it's literal. There's some parts of the Bible that are allegory. Okay, well, if that's your take, that you believe the Bible, like, Romney and these other guys had said, that they believe the Bible is the Word of God, but they don't take every bit of it literally. Some of it is clearly allegory. All right, please define which parts are allegory and how you came to that conclusion. There's a lot of, commands and instructions and things in there. I don't see how you can, say that if you have an unruly child and you're supposed to take him before the village elders and say, my son's a drunk, and then take him to the edge of town and stone him, how's that allegory? You can't get out of that one. That one isn't allegory, so it's not metaphor, so it must be literal. Now, you said you take everything literally except for the parts that are clearly allegory, so obviously you think that this is either morally just or used to be morally just, and God just changed his mind and said, let's stop stoning kids. I don't care if, and people, oh, you keep using that one example. Well, okay, take it out of the book. I don't care if it's kids. It's like the thing with Elisha and the bears, where, well, it's not really young kids, it's a gang of youths. Like there's a bunch of Crips running around calling somebody bald, and that justifies calling down a curse on them. I don't care if they were toting, TAC 9s and pointing them at them. Okay, maybe then it might have almost been self-defense, but it's still kind of silly that you've got this guy who calls down a curse, and your God honors it and sends a couple bears to kill him. Now, I don't think the story ever happened. I think it's one of those, it's not really allegory, morality plays. It's something to keep kids in line. Don't mock God. Don't mock the priest. Don't make fun of the priest. You better listen to him, or not, God's going to send some bears to tear you to pieces. But